I'm Nicholas Miller. I'm 35 years old, and my own family told me I was no longer welcome in their lives just days before my brother's wedding. Before I tell you how I ended up hosting that very same wedding at my own private island resort, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories can travel. It all started with a phone call. A call that should have never happened. The phone buzzed on the polished glass of my desk, displaying a number I didn't recognize. I was in the middle of finalizing a quarterly report, the kind of boring but necessary work that pays the bills. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something, a flicker of intuition, made me swipe to answer.
"Is this Nicholas Miller?"
A woman's voice asked. It was professional, crisp, but with an undercurrent of discomfort. "This is he," I replied, leaning back in my chair. The skyline of the city sprawled out before me, a testament to years of sleepless nights and relentless work. "Mr. Miller, my name is Laura Vance. I'm the wedding planner for Daniel and Isabella's wedding. My brother, Daniel." A strange mix of warmth and a familiar ache spread through my chest. "Oh, right, Laura. Nice to meet you. Is everything okay with the arrangements?" There was a pause, a silence just long enough to feel heavy. "Well, that's actually why I'm calling," she said, her professional tone wavering slightly. "There's been a change in the guest list. I'm calling on behalf of your parents, Richard and Eleanor Miller." I sat up straighter. My stomach tightened. A change? What kind of change? She took a breath, and I could hear the faint sound of shuffling papers. She was reading from a script. "They've requested that your invitation be formally rescinded." The words hung in the air, cold and sharp. Rescinded? Such a formal, brutal word. Felt like a slap in the face. I didn't say anything. I just waited. "Mr. Miller, are you still there?" "I'm here," I said, my own voice sounding distant to my ears. "That's fine." Another pause. She was clearly thrown by my calm response. "Oh, okay. Well," she hesitated, then seemed to feel the need to complete her task. They wanted me to pass along a message. They said I could almost hear her cringe through the phone. They said, "What, Laura?" They said, and these are their words, "He's not family anymore and isn't needed at this celebration. Not family anymore." The words echoed in the silent office. For years, I had felt like an outsider, a ghost at their family gatherings. But to have it declared so clinically by a stranger, it was a new level of cruel. But instead of the rage or the heartbreak I might have expected, a different feeling washed over me. It was a cold, quiet clarity. The end of a long, exhausting fight I hadn't even realized I was still trying to win. And then I did something that completely baffled Laura Vance. I smiled. "Laura," I said, my voice perfectly level. "Just to confirm, the venue is still the Ocean Vista Grand Resort, correct?" Yes, that's right," she stammered. "It's a beautiful venue. Their top-tier package." "I know it is," I said softly. "I know it very well." I looked at the clock on my wall. It was 2:15 p.m. "Thank you for letting me know, Laura. You've been very professional." I ended the call before she could respond. The silence returned, but now it felt different. It was charged. The fight was over. The game had changed, and they had no idea they had just handed me all the pieces. I swiveled my chair to face the window, looking down at the city I had, in many ways, conquered. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. "Let the show begin." But to understand how we got here, we need to go back a few weeks to the day it all started. The day the invitation arrived. It arrived on a Tuesday. Tucked between a stack of financial reports and a marketing proposal was a thick, cream-colored envelope. The cardstock was heavy, expensive. My name, Nicholas Miller, was written across the front in elegant, flowing calligraphy. It felt foreign in my hands, a relic from a life I rarely intersected with anymore. Inside, the invitation was everything you'd expect. A picture of my brother Daniel and his fiancée Isabella, smiling their perfect, polished smiles. The date, the time, and the place. The Ocean Vista Grand Resort, a seaside paradise known for its exclusivity and astronomical price tag. I had to admit, they had good taste. For a moment, holding that piece of paper, a genuine warmth spread through me. It was more than an invitation. It felt like an olive branch, A sign that maybe, just maybe, things could be different this time. Maybe my success, quiet as I kept it, had finally earned me a real seat at the table. Maybe I wouldn't just be the awkward black sheep brother they had to tolerate at a family function. Fueled by this flicker of hope, I did something I hadn't done in months. I picked up the phone and called my mother. She answered on the third ring. "Hello. Hi, Mom. It's Nicholas." "Oh, Nicholas," she said. The immediate drop in her tone was like a physical blow. The warmth in her voice, which I'd heard her use with Daniel just a week prior, vanished. Is something wrong? That was always the assumption. If I was calling, something must be wrong. "No, Mom, nothing's wrong," I said, forcing a cheerful tone. "I just got the invitation. It's beautiful. I'm so happy for Daniel and Isabella." "Oh yes, it is lovely, isn't it?" Isabella's family has been a tremendous help with the planning. Her father is a partner at a very prestigious law firm. You know, of course he was. The comparison was immediate and unspoken. Daniel worked at a respectable, if unremarkable, law firm. I, on the other hand, was the family's resident cautionary tale, the one who had dropped out of a promising corporate track a decade ago to pursue a silly little tech idea. "That's great," I said, my own cheerfulness starting to feel like a costume. "I was just calling to congratulate you all. It must be a very exciting time." "It is," she said, a sigh escaping her lips. "And a very expensive one. Your father is quite stressed. We just want everything to be perfect for Daniel. He deserves it. He's worked so hard to build a stable life." Every word was a carefully aimed dart. Stable life. Worked hard. The implication was clear. My life was neither of those things. "So, how is everything?" she asked. The vagueness of the question a clear sign of her disinterest. "Still doing your computer thing?" "The computer thing is going well, Mom," I said, my jaw tightening. I thought about telling her. I thought about saying, "Mom, the computer thing just acquired a major competitor in the European market. The computer thing is now a global hospitality tech platform." But I knew it was pointless. I'd tried before. I'd once mentioned a significant milestone, a major contract I had secured, and her response was to immediately change the subject to a small promotion Daniel had received. It was like her brain was physically incapable of processing my success. To her, I would always be the son who failed. The memory of that one family dinner years ago flashed in my mind. It was right after I'd quit my job. I was full of passion, trying to explain my vision for a streamlined, user-friendly booking software for boutique hotels. My father, Richard, had just stared at me over his wine glass, a look of pity on his face. "Son," he'd said, shaking his head slowly, "stick to what you know. A steady salary is worth more than a pipe dream. You'll be begging for your old job back in 6 months." Daniel had just smirked, a silent, "I told you so." That was the moment the wall between us went up. A wall built of their disappointment and my refusal to be defined by it. "Well, that's nice, dear," she said now, her voice already distant. "Listen, I have to run. The florist is calling on the other line. We'll see you at the wedding." The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, the silence of my large, empty apartment pressing in. The beautiful, expensive invitation on my counter suddenly felt like a mockery. It wasn't an olive branch. It was an obligation, a box they had to check. And the hope I had felt just minutes before curdled into a familiar, bitter resignation. The thing you have to understand about my family is that there was never any room for 2 successful sons. There was only room for one, and that role had been cast long before I ever had a chance to audition. Daniel was the golden child. I was the rough draft that got thrown away. Daniel did everything right according to my parents' playbook. He went to the right college, got the right degree, and landed a safe, respectable job as a corporate lawyer. His life was a straight line, a predictable and comforting trajectory that my parents could boast about at their country club. He bought a sensible house in the suburbs, drove a sensible car, and was marrying a sensible girl from a sensible family. He was their masterpiece. I, on the other hand, was a chaotic scribble in the margins. I was the one who asked too many questions, the one who saw the world not as a set of rules to follow, but as a system to be hacked and improved. When I left my stable corporate job, the one my father had pulled strings to get me, It wasn't just a career change in their eyes. It was a personal betrayal. It was a rejection of everything they stood for. The narrative of my failure became a cornerstone of our family dynamic. They never said the word. Of course, they were too polite for that. But it was in every condescending question, every pitying glance, every conversation that was quickly steered away from my life and back to Daniel's latest achievement. His small promotion was celebrated with a lavish dinner. My company's first profitable quarter was met with a skeptical, "Oh, is that so?" A few days after the call with my mother, I met up with Ben Carter for a drink. Ben and I had been friends since childhood, or so I thought. He was one of the few people I still occasionally confided in, a holdover from a life before everything changed. We sat in a dimly lit bar, the kind of place we used to frequent before my life became consumed by 16-hour workdays. "So you're going to the wedding?" he asked, swirling the ice in his whiskey. "Got the invitation," I said with a shrug. "Looks like I made the cut this time." Ben gave a weak smile. "Come on, Nick. It's not like that, isn't it?" I took a long sip of my beer. "Ben, you've seen it. You've been there. Remember Daniel's college graduation party? My parents spent 20 minutes giving a toast about his brilliant future. They didn't even mention I was in the room until my grandmother pointed me out." He winced at the memory. "That was rough, man. I'll give you that." "It's always been rough," I admitted, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. I wish for once they would see me. Not the kid who quit his job, not the guy who's struggling, but just me. I didn't realize my mistake until it was too late. I was being vulnerable. And with Ben, vulnerability was a weapon he would later use against me. I didn't know it then, but his own career had stalled, and a bitter jealousy had taken root. Seeing me, even if he didn't understand the scale of my success, still bothered him. He needed me to be the failure everyone thought I was. A week later, my mother called again. It was unusual. She never called twice in the same month. Her tone was stiff, accusatory. "Nicholas, I had a chat with Ben Carter's mother." She began dispensing with any pleasantries. My blood ran cold. She said, "Ben is very worried about you. He says you're feeling very resentful about the wedding, that you're struggling financially, and feel that Daniel is flaunting his success." I was speechless. Ben had taken my moment of frustration, my cry for simple acceptance, and twisted it into a caricature of petty jealousy. He had fed it to his mother, who had then dutifully delivered the poison narrative to mine. He had validated their story. He confirmed their worst assumptions about me. "Mom, that's not what I said. I started, but I knew it was hopeless. The jury was already in. The verdict had been delivered years ago. We just don't want any drama at the wedding." "Nicholas," she said, her voice dripping with disappointment, "this is Daniel's day. Can you please, for once, just be happy for your brother?" She hung up before I could answer. I stared at the wall. The betrayal from Ben overshadowed by the deeper, older wound from my own family. They didn't even give me the benefit of the doubt. They heard a piece of gossip that confirmed their bias, and they accepted it as gospel. That was the moment I knew the invitation wasn't an obligation. It was a potential liability. In their eyes, I was a bomb waiting to go off, and my presence at the perfect wedding for their perfect son was a risk they were already beginning to regret. The final nail in the coffin came not from my parents, but from my Aunt Carol. Aunt Carol is my mother's younger sister. She's one of those women who thrives on drama, a connoisseur of conflict. She masks her meddling with a thick veneer of syrupy sweet concern. She's the family's unofficial intelligence agent, gathering whispers and rumors and weaponizing them to maintain her position as the central hub of all family information. She called me the day after my mother's accusatory conversation. "Nicky, darling," she cooed into the phone. Her use of my childhood nickname always set my teeth on edge. "I just heard you were feeling a little down about the wedding. Your mother is so worried." "I'm fine, Aunt Carol," I said, my voice flat. I was done playing the game. "Oh, don't be like that, sweetie," she purred. "It's perfectly natural to feel a little envious. Daniel has always had things a bit easier, hasn't he? It's not fair. I've always said that." It was a classic Carol maneuver. Feign solidarity to encourage confidence. She was fishing. "There's nothing to be envious of. I said, "I'm happy for him." "Of course you are. Of course," she said, not believing a word of it. "But this wedding, it's so extravagant. And with your business being so unpredictable, I can see how it would be difficult to watch. It must remind you of what you gave up that big corporate job. You could have had all this, you know." The condescension was suffocating. She was painting a picture of me as a tragic figure consumed by regret and jealousy. And I knew with absolute certainty that this was the same picture she was painting for my parents. She was watering the seeds of doubt they already had, nurturing their narrative that I was a ticking time bomb of resentment. "My business is just fine, Aunt Carol," I said, a dangerous edge creeping into my voice. "You don't need to worry about me." "Oh, I know, dear. You're a fighter," she said. The words meant to sound like a compliment, but landing like an insult. "You always have been. That's why we're all just a bit concerned you might say something at the wedding. You know how you get when you feel cornered?" That was it. That was the master stroke. She wasn't just suggesting I was jealous. She was suggesting I was unstable, a threat to the perfect, pristine image of their perfect family event. She was giving my parents a reason, an excuse to take the final step. "I have to go, Aunt Carol," I said, my patience completely gone. "Of course, darling. Just know we all love you," she said. The lie was so blatant, it was almost funny. I hung up the phone and felt a strange sense of calm. The board was set. All the pieces were in motion. Ben's betrayal had provided the evidence. Aunt Carol's meddling had provided the motive. It was no longer a question of if they would cut me out, but when. And that brings us back to today. Back to my office. The city lights beginning to twinkle in the twilight. Back to the moment after Laura Vance, the wedding planner, delivered the final fatal blow. He's not family anymore. For years, I had absorbed their judgment. I had swallowed their pity. I had endured their condescension. I had let them write my story, casting me as the failure, the disappointment, the cautionary tale. And I had done it all in the faint, foolish hope that one day they would finally see the truth. But sitting there in the silence, I realized the truth didn't matter to them. The only thing that mattered was their story. And I decided right then and there that it was time to write a new one. An ending they would never see coming. My story. The smile on my face faded, replaced by a mask of cold resolve. The emotional part of the equation was over. The hurt, the shock, the sting of betrayal. I compartmentalized it, locked it away in a steel box in the back of my mind. This was no longer a family matter. This was a business transaction. And in business, I never lose. I pressed the intercom button on my desk. "Chloe, could you come in here, please?" A moment later, the door opened, and my executive assistant, Chloe Evans, walked in. Chloe had been with me for 5 years, since the days when our headquarters was a cramped office above a laundromat. She was sharp, fiercely loyal, and one of the only people on the planet who knew the full scope of my operations. She had seen me at my most stressed, my most exhausted, but she had never seen me like this. She stopped short when she saw my face. "Nick, is everything all right?" "Everything is perfect," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "I have a job for you. I need you to get Jessica Chin on the line. And then I need you to conference in the general manager of the Ocean Vista Grand Resort. His name is Abernathy. Michael Abernathy." Chloe's eyebrows shot up. Jessica was our top corporate lawyer, the one we brought in for major acquisitions and hostile takeovers. Mr. Abernathy was the highly respected manager of our flagship property. Whatever this was, it was big. Right away, she said, "No more questions asked." She knew my moods, and this was a mood that meant business. Within minutes, 2 lights on my console phone lit up. Jessica was on line 1, Abernay on line 2. "Patch them in together, Chloe, and I want you to stay on the line and record." "Yes, sir," she said. I took a deep breath. "Jessica, Michael, thank you for joining me." "Of course, Nicholas." Jessica's voice was all business. "What's the situation?" "Good afternoon, Mr. Miller." Abernathy's voice was smooth and deferential. "Always a pleasure, Michael," I began. "You have a wedding booked for the last Saturday of this month. The family name is Miller, Daniel Miller and Isabella Vance." I heard the faint clicking of a keyboard as Abernathy pulled up the file. "Yes, sir, I have it right here. The Grand Ocean Ballroom Package, fully paid. It's one of our biggest events of the season. It's canceled, I said. The silence on the line was absolute. Even Chloe, who had heard me make ruthless decisions before, let out a barely audible gasp. Abernathy was the first to speak, his voice laced with confusion. Sir, cancelled. There must be some mistake. The family hasn't contacted us. There is no mistake, I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. The booking is to be cancelled immediately. The reason you will provide is an unforeseen scheduling conflict with the venue's ownership that necessitates the use of the property. Is that clear? An ownership conflict? Abernathy stammered. But, sir, you are the owner. Precisely, I said. Jessica, are you hearing this? Loud and clear. Nicholas, she replied, the understanding dawning in her voice. You're exercising your executive prerogative. I am. I want a full and immediate refund of their deposit processed. Not just the deposit, everything they've paid to date. And I want you to add a $10,000 inconvenience fee as a gesture of goodwill from the management. The word management dripped with irony. I want the cancellation notice and the wire transfer confirmation sent to the primary contact email on that file within the hour. Nicholas, if I may, Jessica interjected, her lawyerly caution kicking in. This is highly unusual. Could be seen as a breach of contract even with the compensation. Do you anticipate any legal blowback? The only blowback I anticipate, I said, looking out at the city lights, is a very panicked phone call. And that is exactly what I want. Let them think the venue is screwing them over. Let them scramble. Let them feel for just a moment what it's like to have the world pulled out from under them. Do you understand your instructions? Perfectly, Mr. Miller, Abernathy said, his voice now steady. He understood. An order was an order. Crystal clear, Nicholas, Jessica confirmed. Good, I said. Make it happen. I ended the call and leaned back in my chair, the leather sighing under my weight. Chloe stood by the door, her eyes wide. Nick, she started. That was intense. Is this about your family? I finally looked at her, and for the first time, I let the mask slip. She saw the hurt, the raw anger simmering just beneath the surface. They told me I wasn't family anymore, Chloe, I said softly. They're about to find out just how wrong they are. The email landed in Daniel's inbox at 5:47 p.m. I can picture the scene perfectly. He and Isabella would have been at my parents' house, probably finalizing some last-minute detail for the wedding, the seating chart, the flavor of the ridiculously overpriced cake. My mother, Eleanor, would be fluttering around them, micromanaging every decision. My father, Richard, would be sitting in his worn leather armchair pretending to read the newspaper, but listening to every word. A proud, self-satisfied smile on his face. The subject line would have been stark and professional. Urgent notification regarding your event booking at the Ocean Vista Grand Resort. Daniel, ever the efficient lawyer, probably opened it immediately, expecting a confirmation or a minor query. Instead, he got a corporate laced dagger to the heart of his perfect wedding plans. Dear Mr. Miller and Ms. Vance, we are writing to inform you of an unforeseen and unavoidable scheduling conflict concerning the ownership of the Ocean Vista Grand Resort. This conflict necessitates the full and exclusive use of the property on the date of your scheduled event. Therefore, with our deepest regrets, we must inform you that we are unable to host your wedding on the planned date. This decision is final and comes directly from the executive board of the Ocean Vista Hospitality Group. Please be assured that a full refund of all payments made to date in the amount of $75,000 has already been processed. Furthermore, as a gesture of our profound apology for this disruption, we have included an additional $10,000 compensation for any inconvenience this may cause. A confirmation of the wire transfer is attached. We understand this news is deeply distressing and wish you the best in securing an alternative venue. Sincerely, Ocean Vista Management. For a few seconds, there would have been silence as Daniel's brain tried to process the words canceled, unavoidable ownership conflict, final. Then the implosion. What? The word would have been a strangled gasp. No, 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 no. Isabella would have rushed to his side, reading the email over his shoulder. Her hand would fly to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief and horror. They can't do this. We have a contract. My mother would have been the next to react, her voice rising in panic. Daniel, what is it? What's wrong? He would have just shoved the phone into her hands, unable to speak. My father would have put down his paper, his brow furrowed. What's all this nonsense? And then, chaos. Cancelled. My mother would shriek, the word echoing through the perfectly decorated living room. What do they mean? Richard, do something! My father, after reading the email, would turn a shade of purple I knew all too well. It was his go-to color for impotent rage. This is unacceptable, an outrage. Who do these people think they are? I'll sue them. I'll sue the entire hotel chain. Daniel, finding his voice, would already be dialing his phone, his face a thunderous mask. I'm calling that planner. Laura, this has to be her fault. She messed something up. She must have. It's a classic trait of my family. When faced with a problem, the first step is never to understand it, but to assign blame. It couldn't possibly be a random, impersonal corporate decision. No, someone had to be at fault. Someone had to pay. And Laura Vance, the intermediary, was the easiest target. I can just hear the conversation. Daniel's voice shaking with fury as he yelled into the phone at a completely bewildered Laura. Isabella would be crying in the background, her dream wedding dissolving into a nightmare. My mother would be pacing, wringing her hands and muttering about how this would be the talk of the town. A complete and utter humiliation. My father would be blustering about lawyers and contracts, threatening to ruin this tin pot resort for their insolence. This has to be some kind of sick joke, Daniel would say, his voice cracking. And in a moment of bitter, unintentional irony, he would probably add something like, "It's like we're cursed. I bet it's Nicholas. I bet his bad luck is somehow rubbing off on us." Even from a distance from my office, miles away, I watched the sun dip below the horizon. My phone remained silent. I had lit the fuse. Now, all I had to do was wait for the explosion to reach me, and I knew it wouldn't be long. They were angry, they were panicked, and they were looking for a scapegoat, and sooner or later, their frantic search for answers would lead them inadvertently right to my door. My phone finally rang an hour later. It was Laura Vance, the wedding planner. Her voice was frayed, trembling on the edge of hysteria. "Mr. Miller, Nicholas, I am so sorry to bother you. I am in a desperate situation and I don't know who else to call." I kept my tone calm and neutral. "Laura, what's the problem?" "The problem?" She almost laughed. A broken, frantic sound. "The problem is that the Ocean Vista Grand Resort just caniddled your brother's wedding 3 weeks before the date. I have your entire family on the other line screaming at me, threatening lawsuits, blaming me for everything. They're convinced I messed up the booking." "And did you?" I asked simply. "No, of course not. The contract was ironclad. Everything was confirmed and paid for. This came out of nowhere. The email they sent, it mentioned a conflict with the ownership. It makes no sense. I've never heard of anything like this happening in my entire career." She took a shaky breath. "Look, I know this is a long shot, and given the conversation we had earlier, I have no right to ask. But your family won't listen to me. They think I'm lying. I was hoping maybe you could talk to them. Maybe as a family member you could, I don't know, reason with them." It was perfect. She was leading them right into the trap without even knowing it. "I'm not sure what good I can do, Laura," I said, feigning reluctance. "As you pointed out, they don't exactly consider me family at the moment." "Please, Nicholas," she begged. "I'm at my wit's end. My reputation is on the line here. If you could just join a conference call just for a few minutes, just to help them understand that this isn't my fault, I would be forever in your debt." I let the silence hang for a moment, making her wait. "All right, Laura, for you. Patch me in." The line clicked and I was suddenly thrown into a cacophony of angry, overlapping voices. "Complete incompetence. We paid you a fortune." That was my father. "My one day, my one perfect day is ruined." That was Isabella, sobbing. But one voice cut through the noise, sharp and venomous. "My brother Daniel, there you are. Took you long enough to find him," Daniel snarled, assuming Laura had been searching for me. "What do you want, Nicholas? Come to gloat?" The line fell silent. My other family members were clearly shocked that I was on the call. "Hello, Daniel," I said calmly. "Don't you?" "Hello, Daniel me," he shot back, his voice dripping with contempt. "I know this is you. This has your name written all over it. You couldn't stand to see me happy, could you? You couldn't stand that my life was working out while yours is a complete mess. So you did something. You called the hotel. You probably lied. Said something to get them to cancel. You sabotaged my wedding because you're a jealous, pathetic failure. The accusation was so vile, so far from the truth, that it was almost breathtaking. Years of simmering resentment, of perceived slights, of his own deep-seated insecurity, all came pouring out in that single hateful tirade. My father chimed in, his voice a low growl. "Is this true, Nicholas? Did you do this?" Instead of answering, I turned my attention back to the planner. "Laura," I said, my voice steady, a rock in their ocean of chaos. "Are you still there?" "Why, yes," she stammered, clearly horrified by the family drama she had been dragged into. "Laura, you mentioned the cancellation was due to a conflict with the venue's ownership," I said, my words deliberate and clear. "Is that correct?" "Yes, that's what the email said." "And does it happen to name the ownership group?" Let me see." I heard her rustling papers again. "Yes, it says the decision came from the executive board of the Ocean Vista Hospitality Group." "Thank you, Laura," I said. "You've been very helpful." Then I addressed my brother directly, a chill creeping into my voice that silenced everyone on the line. "Daniel," I said, "you are right about one thing. This does have my name written all over it. Just not in the way you think." The silence that followed my statement was thick with confusion. I could practically feel them on the other end of the line, exchanging bewildered glances. Daniel's tirade had been so full of conviction, so certain of my role as the petty saboteur, that my calm, cryptic response completely disarmed him. "What? What the hell is that supposed to mean?" Daniel finally stammered, his anger momentarily replaced by suspicion. "It means you're making assumptions, Daniel," I replied, my voice even. "You've been making them for the last 10 years. My father, ever impatient, cut in. "Stop playing games, Nicholas. If you have something to say, say it. We don't have time for your riddles. My son's wedding is in ruins." My son's wedding. I repeated the words softly, letting the possessive pronoun hang in the air. "That's right. It's always about your son, isn't it, Dad?" I decided to let them squirm a little longer. This wasn't just about revealing the truth. It was about making them confront the foundation of lies their relationship with me was built on. I turned my attention back to the only neutral party on the call. "Laura," I said, my tone shifting back to something more professional, more controlled. "I apologize for my family's behavior. They are under a great deal of stress. To clear up this confusion, I think it would be best if we got someone from the hotel's senior management on the line. Someone who can explain this ownership conflict in no uncertain terms." Laura seized the lifeline I'd thrown her. "Yes, of course. That's a great idea. Who should I ask for?" Here it was. The moment to play the ace I had kept tucked up my sleeve for so long. "Ask for Mr. Abernathy," I said. "Michael Abernay. He's the general manager of the entire resort chain. Tell his office that Nicholas Miller requests his immediate presence on this conference call. Use my full name. They'll know what it means. Abernathy." My father scoffed. "You think calling some middle manager is going to help? Nicholas, you're delusional. He's probably buddies with the night janitor." Daniel sneered, his confidence returning. "He's going to get his friend to come on and lie for him. This is pathetic, even for you." I ignored them. Their mockery was like the yapping of small dogs at the feet of a giant. It was meaningless noise before the inevitable. "Please do that now, Laura," I instructed gently. "Right away, Mr. Miller," she said, her voice filled with a newfound respect. She recognized authority when she heard it. She put us on a brief hold, and the line was filled with tiny, generic hold music. My family, however, didn't stay quiet. "I can't believe this," my mother whispered, her voice trembling. "He's making a scene just like Carol said he would. He's trying to humiliate us." "Don't worry, Eleanor," my father grumbled. "He's making a fool of himself. When this Abernathy fellow comes on, I'll give him a piece of my mind about his staff's incompetence and his friendship with our deadbeat son." I closed my eyes, a small, weary smile touching my lips. They were so predictable, so blinded by their own narrative that they couldn't see the cliff they were gleefully marching towards. They thought I was playing checkers. They had no idea I had been playing chess the entire time. And they were just a few moves away from checkmate. The music stopped. Laura's voice came back on the line, now sounding even more flustered than before. "Okay," she said, her voice a little breathless. Mr. Abernathy's assistant patched me through immediately. He's joining the call now. A new voice entered the line. It was deep, calm, and exuded a quiet, effortless authority. This is Michael Abernathy. To whom do I have the pleasure of speaking? My father, never one to miss an opportunity to assert his perceived dominance, immediately jumped in. His voice was a booming, condescending baritone, the one he used when dressing down a subordinate. Mr. Abernathy, Richard Miller here. It's about time someone with some authority got on this line. I am the father of the groom whose wedding your establishment has just seen fit to destroy with less than a month's notice. I want an explanation, and I want one now. This level of unprofessionalism is staggering. Do you have any idea who we are? There was a beat of silence from Abernathy's end. It wasn't a confused silence. It was a calculating one. Mr. Miller, Abernathy began, his tone impeccably polite yet icy. I am aware of the situation with your son's event. The decision, I assure you, was not made lightly. Not made lightly. Daniel chimed in, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Oh, that's rich. You've ruined what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. And you tell me the decision wasn't made lightly. What could possibly be more important than a fully paid, contractually obligated wedding? This was the moment, the precipice. Before Abernathy could respond, I spoke. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a knife. Mr. Abernathy, I said, this is Nicholas Miller. The shift in Abernathy's tone was instantaneous and seismic. The polite formality he'd shown my father vanished, replaced by genuine deference and respect. Mr. Miller, he said, and I could hear the warmth in his voice even through the phone. Good afternoon, sir. I received your message. I am at your complete disposal. How can I assist you? The line went dead silent. Utterly, completely silent. The sound of my father and brother's bravado deflating was almost audible. The whiplash was too severe. The change in dynamics too abrupt for their brains to comprehend. One moment, Abernathy was a faceless hotel manager they could bully. The next, he was addressing me, Nicholas, the family failure, with the kind of respect a subordinate shows to a powerful superior. I could picture their faces. The smug anger on my father's face would be melting into a puddle of confusion. The sneer on Daniel's lips would be frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief. My mother and Isabella would be looking back and forth between the phone and each other, trying to make sense of what they had just heard. I don't understand, my mother finally whispered into the void. Why is he talking to you like that? Daniel found his voice first. A choked, incredulous sound. What is this? Some kind of prank? Did you pay this guy, Nick? Is that it? Did you use what little money you have to pay off the hotel manager to play along with some pathetic power fantasy? The accusation was so absurd, so desperate, that I almost felt a pang of pity for him. He was so deep in his delusion that reality itself seemed like a conspiracy. I didn't answer him. I didn't need to. I let the deafening silence do the work. I let them sit in that uncomfortable, confusing space, their entire worldview beginning to fracture. The story they had told themselves for a decade was starting to crumble, and the noise of its collapse was the silence on the other end of the line. They thought they were in a shouting match. They didn't realize they were in a boardroom, and they were about to be informed that their shares had just been rendered worthless. Mr. Abernathy, I said, my voice cutting through the heavy silence, calm and deliberate. My family seems to be under some misapprehensions regarding the cancellation. They believe it to be either an error on the part of the wedding planner or a malicious act on my part. Could you please clarify for them the official reason for this decision? This was it. The point of no return. I was no longer defending myself. I was simply requesting a statement of fact from my own employee. Of course, sir, Abernathy said, his voice a model of professional clarity. He was no longer speaking to my family. He was addressing me, but ensuring they heard every word. As stated in the official correspondence, the cancellation was due to a non-negotiable directive from the ownership of the Ocean Vista Hospitality Group. The owner has decided to make personal use of the property on that date. My father, clinging to the last vestiges of his authority, sputtered, "The owner? Who is this owner? I want his name. I'll call him myself." Abernathy's voice became tinged with a slight, almost imperceptible amusement. Sir, with all due respect, I don't think that will be necessary. And why not? Richard demanded. I decided to end the suspense. Mr. Abernathy, I interjected smoothly, for the sake of absolute clarity, could you please confirm for everyone on this call the name of the sole proprietor and owner of the Ocean Vista Hospitality Group? The silence stretched for a heartbeat. It was the most dramatic pause I had ever witnessed. It was the intake of breath before the thunderclap. And then Abernathy delivered the line that shattered their world. Certainly, sir, he said, his voice ringing with indisputable authority. The founder, sole proprietor, and chairman of the board for the Ocean Vista Hospitality Group is Mr. Nicholas Miller, the gentleman you are speaking with right now. Boom! The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with the sound of collapsing realities. It was the sound of a decade of smug superiority, of pitying glances and condescending remarks, all turning to ash in an instant. I heard a gasp. It might have been my mother, or Isabella, or both. Then a choked sound from Daniel. That's not possible. That's a lie. I can assure you it is not a lie, Abernathy said, his voice hardening slightly at the challenge to his integrity. I am looking at the corporate ownership filings right now. Mr. Nicholas Miller acquired the O'Malley Hotel Group 3 years ago and has since restructured it into the Ocean Vista Hospitality Group, which now includes 7 premium resort properties across North America and the Caribbean. My employment and the employment of the 2,000 other staff members in this company is at the discretion of Mr. Miller. Every word was a hammer blow, dismantling the flimsy structure of their narrative about me. 7 properties, North America and the Caribbean, 2,000 employees. These weren't the statistics of a failure. These weren't the numbers of a man struggling with his little computer thing. But his startup, my father stammered, his booming voice reduced to a confused murmur. It failed. He lost everything. I decided it was time to speak for myself again. It was time to deliver the final killing blow to their most cherished story. It didn't fail. Dad, I said, and for the first time, I let the years of frustration and hurt color my voice. You just stopped listening. You never asked. You assumed. You heard what you wanted to hear. Because my failure made Daniel's mediocre success look like a triumph. I took a deep breath. Mr. Abernathy, could you do me one more favor? Anything, sir. Could you pull up the public records for the acquisition of a tech company called Streamline Systems about 3 years ago? I believe the acquiring party was a Hospitality Holdings Corporation. A few clicks of the keyboard. Yes, sir, I have it. Streamline Systems, a booking and logistics software firm, was acquired by the O'Malley Hotel Group for some of my goodness. Abernathy paused, genuinely taken aback by the number. He cleared his throat. It was acquired in an all-cash deal for $87 million. The only sound on the line was a sharp, sudden sob from my mother. $87 million. The number so specific and so immense was undeniable. It was a fact recorded in the public domain that completely invalidated their decade-long fiction. My failed startup hadn't just been a success, it had been a monumental one. It had been the foundation of an empire they never knew existed. The game was over. Checkmate. The silence on the line was no longer one of confusion. It was the silence of shock. The silence of utter world-altering humiliation. The false kingdom my parents had built, with Daniel on the throne and me in the dungeon, had just been leveled by a single undeniable truth. Daniel was the first to break. His voice was a broken whisper, unrecognizable from the arrogant man who had been screaming at me just minutes before. 87 million. He said the number as if it were a foreign word, as if he couldn't form his mouth around it correctly. That was the initial sale, I said, my voice flat and devoid of triumph. I felt no joy in this, only a profound, hollow sadness. The subsequent investments in real estate and hospitality have done well. Why? My mother finally choked out, her voice thick with tears. Nicholas, why didn't you tell us? The question was so utterly, breathtakingly ironic that a bitter laugh almost escaped me. Tell you, I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Mom, I tried. I tried to tell you for years. I tried to tell you about the first big contract. I tried to tell you when we expanded to 5 employees. I tried to tell you when we finally became profitable. Do you remember what you said the last time I tried to share good news? You said, "That's nice, dear," and then immediately started talking about the new set of golf clubs Daniel had bought. You didn't listen. None of you ever listened. I turned my attention to my father. Dad, you told me I'd be begging for my old job back in 6 months. You called my dream a pipe dream. You built a narrative of my failure and you polished it every single day. Why would I share my success with people who were so clearly invested in my defeat? Richard was silent. For the first time in his life, my father, a man who had an opinion on everything, had absolutely nothing to say. He had been proven wrong. Not just wrong, but catastrophically spectacularly wrong. His judgment, the bedrock of his patriarchal authority, had been revealed as a complete and utter sham. Isabella, the bride-to-be, whose perfect day was at the center of this storm, finally spoke. Her voice was small but clear. "So you canceled our wedding just to get back at them?" It was a fair question. From her perspective, this was an act of colossal vengeful spite. "No, Isabella," I said, and my voice softened slightly. She was for the most part an innocent bystander in this year's long family tragedy. I can tell the wedding because my family, the people who were supposed to love and support me, informed me through a stranger that I was no longer a part of their lives. They downed me. They declared me not family. What would you have me do, send a fruit basket? I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. The cancellation wasn't the revenge. It was a consequence. An action has a reaction. They made a business decision to cut me out of their lives. I made a business decision regarding my property. The fact that those two things collided so spectacularly is a result of their own ignorance. Mr. Miller. Abernathy's voice cut in gently, sensing the raw emotion of the moment. Do you have any further instructions for me? He was giving me an out, a way to end the call and let the pieces fall where they may. Yes, Michael, I said, pulling myself back into the role of CEO. Please maintain the cancellation, and thank you for your assistance. You may disconnect. Of course, sir. Have a good day. He clicked off the line, leaving me alone with the wreckage of my family. Nicholas, wait, Daniel pleaded, his voice desperate. Don't hang up, please. What? What are we supposed to do? Every venue is booked. Isabella's parents, the guests. This is a disaster, an absolute disaster. He was no longer the golden child. He was just a scared man whose perfectly constructed world had been shattered. He was, for the first time, asking me for help. Not as a brother, but as a subordinate asking for a favor from a man who held all the power. And in that moment, I knew this was about more than just a wedding. It was about whether this broken, shattered thing that we called a family could ever be put back together again. The desperation in Daniel's voice was a new sound. I'd heard him be arrogant, dismissive, proud, and angry. I had never in my entire life heard him sound weak. He was pleading, and my parents, suddenly finding their voices, quickly joined the chorus. Nicholas, son. My father started, his tone unctuously gentle, a complete 180 from his earlier blustering. Surely we can talk about this. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I repeated the words, tasting like acid, for 10 years. Dad, that's not a misunderstanding. That's a chosen reality. You chose to believe I was a failure because it was easier than admitting your judgment was wrong. We were just worried about you, darling. My mother chimed in, her voice thick with manufactured sympathy. We wanted you to have a secure life like Daniel. We never meant to hurt you. It was incredible. Even after the world's shattering revelation, their first instinct was to rewrite history, to smooth over the jagged edges of their cruelty with the platitudes of parental concern. They weren't apologizing for what they did. They were making excuses for it. Stop, I said. And the single word carried so much weight it silenced them all. Just stop. Do you hear yourselves? You're not sorry for how you treated me. You're sorry I turned out to be successful. You're sorry you alienated the son who now, by a twist of fate, holds the fate of your other son's wedding in his hands. This isn't about love. This is about damage control. I could hear their shocked silence. They weren't used to me talking this way. They were used to the quiet, accommodating Nicholas, who would just swallow the insult and retreat into himself. That Nicholas was gone. This was never about the money, I continued, my voice gaining strength with every word. I could not care less about the cost of this wedding. This is about respect. It's about being seen as a human being by my own family. It's about not being treated like a stain on your perfect family portrait. I took a deep breath, the words pouring out of me now, a torrent of suppressed pain. You disowned me. You told a stranger I wasn't your family. You did it casually, clinically, because you thought I was insignificant. You thought I had no power, no value, and therefore my feelings didn't matter. That is the core of the issue, not the venue, not the money. I let my words hang in the air. This was the line in the sand. This was the moment they had to confront the ugliness of their own behavior, without excuses or justifications. So no, I said, my voice firm, we are not going to pretend this was a misunderstanding. We are not going to sweep a decade of dismissiveness under the rug because you're in a tight spot. The wedding at the Ocean Vista Grand Resort is canceled, and it will remain canceled. I could hear Isabella let out a soft cry. I felt a pang of sympathy for her, but this was bigger than her wedding day. This was about salvaging what little was left of my own dignity. However, I said, letting a sliver of possibility enter my voice, that doesn't mean we have nothing to talk about. But if we are going to have a conversation, it will be an honest one. For the first time in our lives, and it will be on my terms. I had their complete, undivided attention. For the first time, they weren't just hearing me. They were listening. The silence on the line was different now. It was no longer shocked or confused. It was expectant. I had closed one door firmly in their faces, but I had hinted at opening another. They were waiting, holding their breath to see what lay behind it. What? What terms? Daniel asked, his voice cautious. I leaned forward in my chair, the plan that had been forming in the back of my mind now coming into sharp focus. This wasn't about revenge anymore. If it were, I would have just hung up the phone and let them deal with the mess. This was about demonstrating the difference between their kind of power, which was based on exclusion and judgment, and my kind, which was based on capability and choice. The problem, Daniel, is that you tried to have a champagne wedding on a beer budget of respect. I said, you wanted the appearance of a perfect family, but you weren't willing to do the work of actually being one. That's not fair, he muttered. Isn't it? I countered. You were perfectly happy to have me excluded when you thought I was an embarrassment. The only thing that has changed is the name on my bank account. So here is my offer. It's a one-time deal. I paused, letting the tension build. The Ocean Vista Grand Resort is off the table. As I said, I have personal plans for it. However, I have another property. It's not part of the public chain. It's a private estate on Catalina Island. It has its own beach, a helicopter pad, and a staff that can accommodate up to 300 guests on very short notice. I could hear their minds racing, trying to process what I was saying. Private estate, Catalina Island. I will host your wedding there, I continued. I will cover the entire cost. The venue, the catering, the staff, the flowers, everything. It will be more beautiful and more exclusive than anything you could have booked at the Grand Resort. I will give Isabella the wedding of her dreams, free of charge. The offer hung in the air. A stunning, unbelievable proposition. You would do that? My mother asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Yes, I said, but on one condition. Anything? Daniel said immediately. My condition had nothing to do with money or apologies. Not yet. Those would have to be earned, not coerced. My condition was simpler, and in its own way much more profound. My invitation is to be reinstated. I said, my voice clear and firm, not as a begrudging obligation, but as a genuine request. I will attend the wedding, not as a guest, but as your brother, and I will be treated with the respect that title implies. That is my only condition. You will welcome me back into the family, publicly and unequivocally. The rest, the apologies, the long talks, that can come later. But this is the first step. I leaned back. The ball was in their court. I had offered them an incredible gift, a solution to their nightmare. But it came at a price. Their pride. They had to admit they were wrong. They had to undo the very act that started this entire mess. After a long moment, it was Daniel who spoke, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite place. It sounded like a mixture of shame and relief. "Yes," he said softly. "Of course, Nick. Please, please come to my wedding." 2 months later, I stood on a manicured lawn overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The California sun was warm on my face, and a gentle sea breeze rustled the palm trees. A string quartet played softly near a floral arch, and impeccably dressed guests mingled, sipping champagne and admiring the breathtaking view. This was my Catalina estate, a place I usually reserved for corporate retreats or personal escapes. Today, it was the backdrop for my brother's wedding. To say things had been different in the intervening weeks would be an understatement. The family dynamic had been completely upended. The calls from my parents were no longer perfunctory and dismissive. They were hesitant, awkward, filled with a new, unfamiliar difference. They would ask for my opinion on details for the wedding I was hosting, and actually listened to my answers. It was a strange and unsettling reversal of our lifelong roles. Daniel had been the most transformed. He called me a week after our conference call. The conversation was stilted, painful. He stumbled through an apology that was both clumsy and, I felt, sincere. He admitted that he had been caught up in our parents' narrative for so long that he never stopped to question it. He saw me not as his brother, but as a rival in a competition. He didn't even realize he was winning by default. Now, seeing him at the end of the aisle waiting for Isabella, he looked different, less arrogant, more grounded. When he saw me taking my seat in the front row, he caught my eye and gave me a small, grateful nod. It wasn't a solution to all our problems, but it was a start. The wedding itself was flawless. My staff, led by the unflappable Mr. Abernathy, who had flown in specifically for the event, performed with their usual perfection. Isabella was radiant, and as she walked down the aisle, I saw a genuine, unadulterated happiness on my brother's face that I hadn't seen since we were kids. For a moment, all the bitterness, all the history faded away, and I was just a man watching his brother get married. My parents were a study in quiet bewilderment. They wandered through the event as if in a daze, overwhelmed by the casual, understated opulence of it all. They knew I was successful now, but seeing it, feeling it, was another matter entirely. This wasn't the flashy, insecure wealth they understood. This was a quiet, confident power that left them feeling small and out of their depth. During the reception, as guests danced under a canopy of stars, Isabella found me by the terrace overlooking the ocean. "Nicholas," she said, her wedding dress shimmering in the moonlight. "Isabella, you look beautiful. Congratulations." "Thank you," she said, her smile genuine for everything. This is more than I ever could have dreamed of," she paused, twisting the stem of her champagne flute. "And I wanted to apologize." I raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For believing them," she said, her gaze direct and unflinching. "I listened to the stories. I believe you were what they said you were. I never questioned it. I saw how they treated you, and I went along with it because it was easier, and I am so sorry for that. You deserved better." Her apology, unsolicited and sincere, meant more to me than any of the stilted obligatory words from my parents. She saw the truth, and she was willing to own her part in the fiction. "Thank you, Isabella," I said, and I meant it. "That means a lot," she nodded, then looked over at Daniel, who was laughing with some old college friends. "He's changing, you know," she said softly. This whole experience, it shook him. It made him look at himself and our family in a way he'd never had before. I think you may have saved more than just his wedding." She squeezed my arm gently and then rejoined her husband on the dance floor. I stayed on the terrace, listening to the distant sound of the waves. Maybe she was right. Maybe this wasn't an ending. Maybe, just maybe, it was a beginning. The day after the wedding, the guests were gone. The music had faded. All that remained was the family. We sat on the large, sun-drenched patio of the main house, a fragile truce hanging in the air. The perfect wedding was over. Now came the messy, complicated part. The truth started surprisingly with Daniel. He sat across from me, looking exhausted but clear-eyed. "Nick," he began, and the others fell silent. There's something else you should know. A reason why I was so on edge about this wedding." He took a deep breath. "The truth is, I'm in over my head financially. My law firm. It's not as lucrative as I let on. I got a promotion last year, but the pay bump was minimal. We bought a house we couldn't really afford. Isabella's parents helped with the down payment, and there was this pressure to keep up appearances, to have this huge, perfect wedding that would signal to everyone that I was as successful as Dad always boasted I was." He looked down at his hands. "We were putting most of it on credit cards. When the resort canceled, it wasn't just the humiliation. It was the fear of financial ruin. I acted like a jerk because I was terrified. And it was easier to lash out at you, the person we'd all designated as the family scapegoat, than to face my own failures." It was a stunning confession. The golden child, the pillar of stability, was admitting his perfect life was a facade. My father looked uncomfortable. My mother looked heartbroken. They had pushed him so hard to be their icon of success that they had driven him to the brink. As we were absorbing this, my young cousin Leo, who had stayed on with his parents, wandered over. He'd always been a sweet kid, one of the few relatives who had always been kind to me. He was fiddling with his phone. "Hey, Aunt Eleanor," he said innocently. "I was just looking at the pictures from the wedding. Aunt Carol posted a bunch." My mother stiffened at the mention of her sister's name. "Oh, that's nice, dear." "Yeah," Leo continued, oblivious to the tension. "She wrote this really long caption. It says, 'So proud of my wonderful nephew Daniel and his beautiful bride. So glad they managed to have a perfect day, despite the unnecessary drama and jealousy from those who wish them ill. Family should always lift each other up, not tear each other down.' It's weird. She said almost the exact same thing to me on the phone last month when she was asking about Uncle Nick." The silence that followed was electric. Everything clicked into place. The final piece of the puzzle, Carol's sweet, concerned phone calls, her worry about my jealousy, her careful, poisonous whispers. Ben Carter may have provided the kindling, but Aunt Carol had been the one fanning the flames, turning my parents' quiet prejudice into an inferno of judgment. She had orchestrated the drama she was now so piously condemning on social media. My mother's face went pale. "Carol," she whispered, the realization dawning on her. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a new, horrifying understanding. "Oh, Nicholas, what have we done?" It was all out in the open now. Not just their dismissiveness, but Daniel's insecurity, my parents' misplaced pride, and the insidious manipulation from within their own circle. The fiction they had created about me wasn't just their own invention. It had been co-authored by jealousy and fear. They had no more excuses, no more narratives to hide behind. All that was left was the raw, uncomfortable truth, and the question of what, if anything, we were going to do with it. This was no longer just about me being wronged. It was about a family system so broken that it nearly destroyed itself from the inside out.